When my son died, his widow blamed their 16-year-old daughter and chose bottles over her own child. I found my granddaughter alone, starving, wearing the same clothes for months. A decade later, she's a trauma surgeon. Then one night, her mother arrived at her ER, barely alive. She had 10 minutes to decide. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me take you back to how this nightmare started. 3 months earlier, David had called me from the hospital. "Mom, it's bad," he'd said, his voice weak from the cancer treatments. "Brenda's been drinking again, and she blames Emily for everything. Says if Emily hadn't been born, we'd have had more money, better insurance, a different life." My son was 38 years old, dying, and still trying to protect everyone from the truth about his wife. I'd driven down from Portland to Denver immediately, but David died 2 days before I arrived. The funeral was a disaster. Brenda showed up drunk, screaming at Emily that it was her fault David got sick from working too many jobs to support her. The poor child just stood there, tears streaming down her face, while her mother destroyed her in front of the entire congregation. After the service, I'd tried to talk to Brenda about Emily. "She needs stability right now," I'd said. "Maybe Emily could come stay with me for a while." Brenda's response still haunts me. "Take her then. I never wanted her anyway. One less mouth to feed." But when I went to pick Emily up the next morning, they were gone, disappeared without a trace. I spent 3 months hiring private investigators, checking schools, calling every family services office in Colorado. Nothing. It was like they'd vanished into thin air. Then last Tuesday, my neighbor Mrs. Patterson called. "Dorothy, there's a girl behind the Walmart who looks just like your David did at that age." My heart nearly stopped. I drove straight there, and that's when I saw her. My granddaughter, my brilliant, beautiful Emily, reduced to scavenging for food scraps. She was so thin I could see her ribs through that filthy sweater. Her once beautiful blonde hair was matted and dirty. But those green eyes, David's eyes, recognized me immediately. "Grandma Dorothy?" she whispered, and I thought my heart would break into a million pieces. I wrapped her in my coat and got her into my car. "Where's your mother, sweetheart?" Emily just shook her head and started crying. Through her sobs, I pieced together the story. After David died, Brenda had blown through the life insurance money in 6 weeks, gambling, drinking, buying things for her new boyfriend. When the money ran out, she'd abandoned Emily in some fleabag motel and disappeared with whatever guy would pay for her drinks. Emily had been living on the streets for 2 months. 2 months. A 16-year-old child, alone, afraid, with no one to turn to. That night, as I watched her sleep in my guest room after her first real meal and hot shower in weeks, I made a promise. Emily would never be abandoned again. I didn't care what it cost me, what I had to do, or who I had to fight. This child was going to have the life David had wanted for her. But I had no idea that 15 years later, Emily would become a trauma surgeon. And I definitely couldn't have predicted that one night her mother would arrive at her ER, barely alive, forcing Emily to make an impossible choice. That night changed everything, but not in the way any of us expected. The social worker, Mrs. Henderson, sat in my living room with a clipboard and the kind of expression that said she'd seen too much tragedy in her 30-year career. "Mrs. Mitchell, Emily isn't legally your responsibility. Her mother is still alive, and until the state declares her unfit, you're essentially harboring a runaway." I poured myself another cup of coffee, trying to look calmer than I felt. "Mrs. Henderson, Emily's mother abandoned her in a motel and disappeared with her boyfriend. How much more unfit do we need? Without proof of abandonment or abuse, my hands are tied. We need documentation, witnesses, something concrete." She looked at Emily, who was curled up on my couch reading one of David's old books. "She seems healthy and well cared for now, but Brenda could show up tomorrow demanding her daughter back." That's exactly what I was afraid of. Brenda showing up drunk, causing a scene, dragging Emily back into chaos. What do I need to do to get legal custody? File for emergency guardianship. Document everything. Where you found her, her condition, any evidence of neglect. It'll take time, probably 6 months if Brenda doesn't contest it. Mrs. Henderson glanced at Emily again. "She's clearly bonded with you. That'll work in our favor." After she left, I sat Emily down for a conversation I'd been dreading. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about what happens if your mother comes back. Emily's face went pale. She won't. She told me I ruined her life and she never wanted to see me again. The matter-of-fact way she said it broke my heart. No child should ever have to repeat those words. Well, just in case, we're going to make sure you're safe legally. But Emily, I need you to tell me everything that happened after your father died. Every detail, even the hard parts. For the next 2 hours, Emily told me stories that made me want to find Brenda and shake her until her teeth rattled. The nights Brenda came home drunk and screamed at Emily for looking like David. The weeks they lived on ramen noodles because Brenda spent the grocery money at the casino. The time Brenda brought home a stranger who tried to get into Emily's room in the middle of the night. I started keeping a knife under my pillow, Emily admitted. Mom said I was being dramatic, but I was scared all the time. She was 16 years old and had been sleeping with a weapon to protect herself from her mother's boyfriends. If that wasn't evidence of an unfit parent, I didn't know what was. The next morning, I enrolled Emily at Jefferson High School. The counselor, Mrs. Baker, looked at Emily's transcripts and whistled. Straight A's, even during what I assume was a difficult period at home. This is exceptional, Emily. Have you thought about college? Emily's eyes lit up for the first time since I'd found her. I want to be a doctor, like a real doctor who helps people. The determination in her voice reminded me so much of David at that age. He'd wanted to be a doctor too, but life had gotten in the way. Marriage, baby, bills, and eventually the construction job that probably exposed him to the chemicals that gave him cancer. Well, with grades like these, medical school is definitely possible, Mrs. Baker said. We'll need to get you involved in some extracurricular activities. Maybe some volunteer work at the hospital. On the drive home, Emily was quiet. Finally, she said, Grandma Dorothy, do you really think I could be a doctor? Mom always said I was too stupid for college. I pulled over and turned to face her. Emily Marie Mitchell, your mother was wrong about a lot of things, but she was especially wrong about you. You're brilliant, determined, and you have more strength at 16 than most adults have in their entire lives. If you want to be a doctor, we'll make it happen. That weekend, we went shopping for school supplies and clothes that actually fit. Emily kept touching everything, like she couldn't believe it was real. Grandma, this is too much money, she said when I bought her a winter coat. Sweetheart, this is what families do. We take care of each other. I didn't tell her I was spending my retirement savings, or that I'd already started looking for a part-time job to help with expenses. Emily's future was worth every penny. 6 weeks later, we got the call I'd been dreading. Brenda had surfaced, and she wanted Emily back. Brenda showed up on my doorstep at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night, drunk enough to need the porch railing for support, but sober enough to be dangerous. Where's my daughter, Dorothy? I know you have her. I didn't open the door. Emily's asleep, Brenda. It's a school night. School night? She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Since when does she care about school? Emily's been nothing but trouble since David died. I tried to handle her myself, but she's too much work. Too much work. That's how this woman described her own child. I kept my voice steady, though inside I was furious. Brenda, you abandoned Emily at a motel. She was living on the streets when I found her. I didn't abandon her. I left her with my cousin Marlene. The lie came so easily, I almost admired the skill. Almost. Marlene must have gotten tired of dealing with her attitude. There was no cousin Marlene. Emily had told me everything, and there had been no family member involved. Brenda had simply packed her bags, taken the last of the insurance money, and left Emily with $30 and a note saying she was going to find herself. Brenda, Emily is settled here. She's doing well in school, making friends. Why don't you get yourself help first? Then we can talk about visits. Visits? Her voice rose to a shriek. She's my daughter, not yours. David's dead, and that means I make the decisions about Emily. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Emily at the top of the stairs, still in her pajamas but wide awake. The look on her face told me she'd heard everything. The fear in her eyes made me want to march outside and drag Brenda off my property by her bleached hair. Mom? Emily's voice was small, uncertain. Brenda pushed past me into the house before I could stop her. There's my girl. Come give Mama a hug. She held out her arms, swaying slightly. Emily stayed on the stairs. Mom, you left me. You said you never wanted to see me again. I was grieving, baby. I said things I didn't mean. But I'm better now, and I want us to be a family again. The performance was almost convincing. If I didn't know better, I might have believed the tears in Brenda's eyes were real. But Emily knew better too. Where are we going to live? Do you have an apartment? We'll figure it out together. Maybe stay with some friends until I get back on my feet. Translation: she had no place to live and planned to drag Emily from couch to couch until someone got tired of supporting them both. I want to stay here with Grandma Dorothy. I'm doing good in school, and I have friends here. Brenda's fake maternal act cracked. You've been poisoning her against me, she said, turning on me with surprising viciousness, filling her head with lies about what happened. The only lies Emily heard came from you. Brenda, I've never said a word against you that wasn't true. You can't keep my daughter from me. I'll call the police. Please do. I'm sure they'd be very interested in talking to you about child abandonment. I kept my voice calm, but my heart was pounding. I had no idea if the legal paperwork Mrs. Henderson and I had filed would be enough to protect Emily. Brenda must have realized she was on shaky ground because her tone shifted again. Look, Dorothy, I know this looks bad, but I've been in rehab. I'm clean now, and I want to make things right with Emily. If she'd been in rehab, it had been the shortest program in history. She'd been gone exactly 4 months, and that was nowhere near enough time for someone with her level of addiction to get truly sober. If you're serious about making things right, then you'll respect Emily's wishes. She wants to stay here and finish high school. After graduation, she can make her own decisions about your relationship. 2 years? Brenda's voice rose again. You want me to wait 2 years to get my daughter back? I want you to prove you're capable of being a mother before you disrupt Emily's life again. Brenda looked at Emily, still standing on the stairs like she was afraid to come down. Is that what you want, Em? To stay here with your grandmother instead of your own mother? Emily's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. The single word hit Brenda like a slap. For a moment, her face showed genuine pain. But then the anger returned, stronger than before. Fine. But this isn't over, Dorothy. Emily's my blood, not yours, and I'll get her back when I'm ready. She left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Emily came downstairs and fell into my arms, crying. She'll be back, Emily whispered against my shoulder. I know, sweetheart, but next time, we'll be ready. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and expensive coffee, neither of which helped my anxiety, as Harrison Mills explained exactly how precarious our legal situation really was. Mrs. Mitchell, the emergency guardianship petition has been approved temporarily, but Brenda can contest it at any time. If she shows up with a lawyer and proof of sobriety, a judge might rule in her favor. I'd already spent $3,000 on legal fees, money I couldn't really afford, and now he was telling me it might not be enough. What kind of proof would convince a judge that Emily should stay with me permanently? Documentation of abandonment, evidence of neglect, witnesses to Brenda's unfitness as a parent. The more concrete evidence we have, the stronger our case. Emily sat beside me, taking notes like she was studying for the most important test of her life. Which, in a way, she was. Mr. Mills, what if my mom gets a job and an apartment? Does that automatically mean I have to go back? Not automatically, but it would strengthen her case considerably. Emily, you're 16. In Colorado, the court considers your wishes, but they're not the deciding factor. The judge will do what they believe is in your best interest, which isn't always what you want. That night, Emily and I sat at the kitchen table making lists. People who had seen Brenda drunk and out of control. Neighbors who remembered the shouting matches. Anyone who could testify to Emily's condition when I found her. Mrs. Patterson saw me behind the Walmart, Emily said, writing carefully. And the manager, Mr. Rodriguez, might remember. He told me I couldn't sleep there anymore. What about your friends from your old neighborhood? Anyone who visited your house and saw how Brenda was living? Emily shook her head. Shook. Mom didn't let me have friends over after Dad died. She said she didn't want people judging our family. The isolation had been deliberate, I realized. Easier to hide the neglect if no one was around to witness it. 3 weeks later, Brenda made her next move. She showed up at Emily's school during lunch, clean and sober, with a folder full of official-looking documents. She'd somehow scraped together money, probably sold something or borrowed from whatever desperate person would lend to her, to hire a lawyer and buy respectable clothes. The school called me immediately. Mrs. Mitchell, Brenda Sullivan is here claiming she's Emily's legal guardian and demanding to take her home. She has what looks like court papers. My blood went cold. Don't let Emily leave with her. I'm on my way. I broke several traffic laws getting to Jefferson High School. In the principal's office, I found Brenda sitting across from Mr. Thompson, looking remarkably put together. Her hair was clean and styled. She was wearing a conservative business suit, and she had the kind of confident smile I hadn't seen from her in years. "Dorothy," she said sweetly, "I was just explaining to Mr. Thompson that there's been a misunderstanding about Emily's living situation. The papers she'd brought were real, a motion to dismiss the guardianship petition and restore her parental rights. She'd hired a lawyer, somehow found money for decent clothes, and was presenting herself as a reformed mother fighting to reunite with her daughter. Mr. Thompson, I need to see Emily immediately. She's in the nurse's office," he said carefully. She became quite upset when she heard her mother was here. I found Emily sitting on the cot in the nurse's office, crying quietly. "Grandma Dorothy, she looks so different. What if the judge believes she's changed?" "Emily, people can change their appearance overnight. Changing who they really are takes much longer." I hugged her tight. "We're going to fight this, but I need you to be strong." The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. 4 days to prepare for a battle that would determine Emily's entire future. Harrison Mills worked around the clock, gathering statements from neighbors, medical records showing Emily's malnourished condition when I found her, and school records documenting her academic improvement since living with me. But Brenda had been busy too. She'd enrolled in an outpatient alcohol program, found a part-time job at a diner, and rented a small apartment. On paper, she looked like a mother who'd made mistakes, but was working hard to make amends. The night before the hearing, Emily couldn't sleep. I found her at the kitchen table at 2 a.m, staring out the window. "Grandma Dorothy, what if I have to go back to her? What if she's really changed this time?" I sat down beside her and took her hands. "Emily, even if your mother has stopped drinking, it doesn't erase what she did to you. A parent's job is to protect their child, not abandon them when life gets difficult. But what if the judge doesn't see it that way? Then we'll deal with it. But sweetheart, I want you to know that no matter what happens, I will never stop fighting for you. Even if I have to wait until you're 18, I'll be here." Emily was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that broke my heart and made me proud at the same time. "I keep thinking about all the kids who don't have anyone to fight for them. After I become a doctor, I want to help them somehow." At 16, after everything she'd been through, Emily was already thinking about helping other people. That's when I knew for certain that whatever happened in court, this remarkable young woman was going to be just fine. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, and colder. Judge Patricia Walsh had the kind of steely gray eyes that suggested she'd heard every sob story and manipulation tactic in the book. Brenda sat at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, looking like a concerned mother in her navy blue dress and pearl earrings. Harrison Mills had warned me that family court judges see cases like this every day, bitter custody battles where both sides claim to be acting in the child's best interest. The key is showing the pattern of abandonment and neglect, not just isolated incidents. Brenda's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Linda Carter, went first. "Your Honor, my client admits she made mistakes during a period of grief following her husband's death. However, Ms. Sullivan has sought treatment for her alcohol dependency, secured stable employment, and obtained suitable housing. She's prepared to provide a loving home for her daughter." Judge Walsh looked at Brenda. "Ms. Sullivan, tell me about the period following your husband's death and your decisions regarding Emily's care." This was where Brenda's performance had to be perfect, and unfortunately, she'd had plenty of practice lying about her parenting. "Your Honor, I was devastated by David's death. We'd been married for 19 years, and I didn't know how to function without him. I made some poor choices, I admit that, but I never stopped loving Emily." "Can you explain how Emily ended up living on the streets?" "I was struggling financially and emotionally. I thought Emily would be better off with my cousin Marlene temporarily while I got my life together. When that arrangement didn't work out, Emily ran away before I could make other arrangements. The lies came so smoothly, I almost believed them myself. There was no cousin Marlene, no plan for Emily's care, no intention to get her life together. But Brenda delivered the fiction with just the right amount of remorse and maternal concern. Harrison Mills had prepared me for this. Let her dig herself in deep with the lies. Then we'll present the evidence that contradicts every word. When it was our turn, Harrison called Mrs. Patterson to the stand first. My neighbor testified about finding Emily behind the Walmart, malnourished and wearing clothes she'd clearly worn for weeks. Then came Mr. Rodriguez, the store manager, who remembered Emily sleeping in the parking lot and begging customers for food. The child was desperate, he said, looking directly at Judge Walsh. I've seen homeless adults in better condition. Emily's school counselor testified about the dramatic improvement in her grades and emotional state since living with me. In my 25 years in education, I've rarely seen such a complete transformation. Emily went from a traumatized, undernourished child to a confident young woman with clear goals and academic potential. But the most powerful testimony came from Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the emergency room physician who'd examined Emily when I first brought her in for a checkup. The patient showed signs of prolonged malnutrition, poor hygiene, and what appeared to be chronic stress. Her emotional responses suggested possible trauma. This was not a child who'd been properly cared for. When Harrison called Emily to testify, my heart nearly stopped. We'd practiced this, but seeing her walk to the witness stand in her best dress, looking so young and vulnerable, made me want to grab her and run. Judge Walsh's voice was gentle. Emily, I know this is difficult. I just want to ask you a few questions about your life before and after moving in with your grandmother. Yes, ma'am. Can you tell me about the last few months you lived with your mother? Emily's voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. After my dad died, Mom started drinking more. She would come home late, sometimes with strangers. She stopped buying groceries and said I was old enough to take care of myself. How did you end up at the motel where your grandmother eventually found you? Mom packed my things and said she was going to find herself. She left me $30 and said I was on my own now. Emily paused, then added quietly. She said I reminded her too much of Dad, and it hurt to look at me. I saw Judge Walsh's expression shift slightly. That detail, the cruelty of rejecting a child for resembling her dead father, seemed to hit its mark. Emily, your mother says she left you with a relative who was supposed to care for you. No, ma'am, there was no relative. Mom left me at the Sunset Motel by myself. When Linda Carter cross-examined Emily, she tried to poke holes in her story, suggesting that grief and adolescent rebellion might have colored Emily's memories. But Emily remained calm and consistent. She answered every question honestly, even when it would have been easier to exaggerate or embellish. The hearing lasted 4 hours. When Judge Walsh called for a recess to review the evidence, Harrison squeezed my shoulder. You did good preparation. Emily's testimony was compelling, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Brenda had presented well, and family courts generally prefer to keep children with biological parents when possible. 20 minutes later, Judge Walsh returned with her decision. This case presents a conflict between parental rights and a child's welfare. While I'm encouraged by Ms. Sullivan's recent efforts toward sobriety and stability, the evidence clearly shows a pattern of abandonment and neglect that placed Emily in serious danger. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear the rest. However, I'm not convinced that terminating parental rights is necessary at this time. Instead, I'm awarding temporary custody to Mrs. Mitchell for a period of 1 year, with supervised visitation for Ms. Sullivan contingent on continued sobriety and completion of parenting classes. It wasn't the complete victory I'd hoped for, but it was enough. Emily would stay with me, finish high school, and have a chance at the future she deserved. As we left the courthouse, Brenda caught up with us in the parking lot. This isn't over, Dorothy. She's my daughter, and one day she'll understand that blood is thicker than water. Emily looked her mother straight in the eye and said, Blood doesn't make someone family, Mom. Love does. It was the last time Emily would see her mother for 15 years. 2 years later, Emily graduated valedictorian from Jefferson High School with a full scholarship to the University of Colorado's pre-med program. The night before she left for college, we sat on the back porch, watching the sunset, both of us pretending we weren't about to cry. Grandma Dorothy, what if I'm not smart enough for medical school? What if I get there and realize I don't belong? I looked at this remarkable young woman who'd survived abandonment, homelessness, and a custody battle that could have destroyed her spirit. Instead, she'd transformed her pain into purpose. her trauma into determination. Emily, you've already survived things that would break most people. Medical school will be challenging, but it won't be harder than what you've already overcome. She leaned against my shoulder the way she used to when she was 16 and afraid. I keep thinking about that night in the motel when Mom left. I was so scared and alone, but I also remember thinking that someday I wanted to help other people who felt that hopeless. And now you're going to do exactly that. The first year of college was rough. Emily called me every Sunday, sometimes crying from exhaustion, sometimes frustrated by organic chemistry or physics. But she never once talked about giving up. By her sophomore year, she was thriving. Dean's List, research opportunities, and leadership positions in pre-med clubs. During winter break of her junior year, she announced her specialty choice. Trauma surgery, Grandma. I want to work in emergency medicine, helping people when they're at their most vulnerable moment. That's going to be emotionally difficult, sweetheart. I know, but maybe that's exactly why I need to do it. I understand what it feels like when your world falls apart in an instant. Medical school acceptance letters arrived on a Tuesday in March. Emily had applied to 12 programs and been accepted to 10, including her first choice, Denver General's prestigious trauma surgery program. I can't believe this is real, she said, holding the acceptance letter with tears in her eyes. Sometimes I still feel like that scared 16-year-old behind the Walmart. Good. Don't ever forget her, Emily. She's the reason you'll be an extraordinary doctor. Medical school was brutal. 18-hour days, impossible exams, clinical rotations that pushed students to their physical and emotional limits. But Emily had an advantage her classmates didn't. She'd already learned how to survive when everything seemed impossible. Her surgery rotation confirmed what I'd always known. Emily had found her calling. Her supervising physician, Dr. Michael Chen, called me after her first month. Mrs. Mitchell, I've been teaching surgery for 15 years, and I've never seen a medical student with Emily's combination of technical skill and emotional intelligence. She has an extraordinary gift. Emily's residency match day was one of the proudest moments of my life. She'd been matched to Denver General's trauma surgery program, the most competitive surgical specialty at one of the country's best hospitals. 5 years of residency, Grandma? 5 years of basically living at the hospital? And then I'll finally be a real surgeon. You're already real to me, sweetheart. During her 3rd year of residency, Emily met Dr. James Porter, a fellow trauma surgeon 3 years ahead of her in the program. He was brilliant, kind, and completely smitten with my granddaughter. Their wedding was small, but perfect. Emily wore my mother's pearl necklace and carried white roses. David would have been so proud to walk her down the aisle. I'm getting everything I never thought I'd have, Emily whispered to me during their first dance. A career I love, a man who loves me, and the family I chose rather than the one I was born into. By her 5th year of residency, Emily was chief resident, leading a team of junior doctors and handling the most complex trauma cases. Her reputation in the Denver medical community was extraordinary. Patients asked for her specifically, and other doctors sought her consultation on difficult cases. The night she finished her residency, we celebrated at a quiet restaurant downtown. Emily was finally Dr. Emily Porter, board-certified trauma surgeon, and I was the proudest grandmother in Colorado. Grandma Dorothy, do you remember what you said to me that first night when I came to live with you? You said Emily would never be abandoned again. I remember. You kept that promise. But more than that, you taught me what unconditional love looks like. That's what saved me, not the rescue itself. 3 months into her attending physician position, Emily was working a night shift in the trauma bay when the ambulance brought in a patient that would change everything. The woman was unconscious, severely malnourished, and showing signs of liver failure consistent with chronic alcoholism. When Emily looked at the patient's face, she nearly dropped her clipboard. Even after 12 years, even ravaged by addiction and poor health, she recognized her mother immediately. Brenda Sullivan had finally resurfaced, and she was dying. Emily called me from the hospital at 3 a.m, her voice shaking. Grandma Dorothy, she's here. My mother is here, and she's dying. I sat up in bed, instantly awake. What do you mean she's here? In my trauma bay. Ambulance brought her in 20 minutes ago. She's unconscious, liver failure, maybe hours left. Emily's professional training was keeping her voice steady, but I could hear the shock underneath. I don't know what to do. First, you need to recuse yourself from her case. You can't be her doctor, Emily. I already called Dr. Martinez to take over. But Grandma, she looks so different, so old and sick. Whatever she's been doing for the past 15 years, it's destroyed her. I threw on my robe and drove to Denver General immediately. I found Emily in the family consultation room, still in her scrubs, staring at her hands. Talk to me. Sweetheart, what exactly is her condition? End-stage liver disease, probably from chronic alcohol abuse, severe malnutrition, dehydration, and what looks like complications from untreated diabetes. Dr. Martinez thinks she has maybe 6 to 8 hours if we don't intervene aggressively. And if you do intervene? Emily was quiet for a long moment. Maybe a few weeks, possibly months if she responds well to treatment. But Grandma, she'd need a liver transplant to have any real chance of survival, and given her history of alcoholism and current condition, she's not a candidate. The irony was devastating. Emily had become exactly the kind of doctor who could save lives. And the first life she couldn't save belonged to the woman who'd abandoned her. Have you seen her yet? Talked to her? She's been unconscious since they brought her in. But her belongings, what little she had, were in a garbage bag. Driver's license expired 5 years ago, address listed as transient. There was a photo of Dad in her wallet, and a newspaper clipping about my medical school graduation. That detail hit me like a punch to the stomach. For 12 years, I'd assumed Brenda had forgotten about Emily entirely, but she'd kept track, known about medical school, maybe even felt proud. It didn't excuse anything she'd done, but it complicated the simple narrative of complete abandonment. Emily, whatever you decide to do, it has to be your choice. Not mine, not what you think your father would have wanted. Yours. At 6 a.m., Brenda regained consciousness. Emily was in the trauma bay when it happened, checking on another patient. Dr. Martinez called her over. Emily, she's asking for you. She knows you're here. Emily looked through the glass at her mother, hooked up to machines that were keeping her alive. After 12 years of wondering what she'd say if she ever saw Brenda again, the moment had arrived. I'll be right back. Grandma. I watched through the window as Emily approached her mother's bed. Brenda looked ancient, though she was only 54. Her hair was gray and thin, her face gaunt and yellow from liver failure. But her eyes, the same green eyes Emily had inherited from David, were alert and focused on her daughter. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I watched Emily's body language change from professional detachment to something more complicated. Brenda was talking rapidly, her hands gesturing weakly. Emily listened, occasionally nodding, her expression unreadable. After 10 minutes, Emily returned to the consultation room, tears streaming down her face. What did she say, sweetheart? She apologized, said she knew she'd been a terrible mother, that leaving me was the worst thing she'd ever done. She said she'd been following my career from a distance, that she was proud of who I'd become. Emily wiped her eyes. She also said she understood if I couldn't forgive her. How do you feel about that? Angry, confused, sad for the time we lost, but also, I don't know, maybe a little relieved? For years I wondered if she ever thought about me, if she ever regretted her choices. Now I know she did. Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway. Emily, I need to talk to you about treatment options. She's stable for now, but her condition is deteriorating rapidly. The next few hours were a blur of medical consultations, ethical discussions, and impossible decisions. Brenda's liver was shutting down, her kidneys were failing, and her body was giving up after years of abuse. We could put her on dialysis, try to stabilize her for a few weeks, Dr. Martinez explained. But given the extent of organ damage, it would likely just prolong the inevitable. What about comfort care? We can manage her pain, keep her comfortable, and let nature take its course, based on her current condition, probably 24 to 48 hours. Emily looked at me, then back at Dr. Martinez. Can I have a few minutes to think? Of course. Take all the time you need. That's when Emily made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. I want to try the aggressive treatment. Not because I think it will save her, but because I need to know I did everything possible. Emily, are you sure? After everything she put you through? Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that showed me exactly what kind of person she'd become. Grandma Dorothy. She was a terrible mother, but she's still a human being who's dying alone. I became a doctor to save lives, not to judge which lives deserve saving. That night, Emily worked alongside Dr. Martinez to stabilize her mother. Dialysis, blood transfusions, medications to support her failing organs. It was a long shot, but for 48 hours, it seemed to be working. On the third day, Brenda had a moment of clarity that would change everything. "Emily, I need to tell you something before it's too late." Brenda's voice was weak, but her eyes were focused and alert for the first time since she'd arrived. "About your father's death, about why I really left you." Emily pulled a chair close to her mother's bed. After 3 days of aggressive treatment, Brenda's condition had stabilized enough for lucid conversation, though everyone knew this was likely temporary. "Mom, you don't have to explain anything right now. Just rest." "No, I do. Because what I'm about to tell you changes everything you think you know about me, about your father, about us." I was sitting in the corner of the room, and Emily looked at me uncertainly. Part of her didn't want to hear whatever confession was coming, but another part needed to understand the woman who'd shaped so much of her life through absence. "Your father didn't die from cancer, Emily." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Emily went completely still. "What do you mean?" "I was there during the treatments. I saw the medical records. He had cancer." "Yes, but that's not what killed him." Brenda's voice was getting weaker, but she pushed through. "Your father was involved with some very dangerous people through his construction work. Money laundering, off-the-books payments, things I didn't understand but should have questioned." Emily's face had gone pale. "You're saying Dad was involved in criminal activity?" "Not willingly, not at first. But when you're desperate for money to pay for cancer treatments, when insurance won't cover experimental procedures, you make choices you never thought you'd make." I felt sick listening to this. David had been such a good man, such a devoted father. The idea that desperation had driven him into criminal activity was heartbreaking. David borrowed money from the wrong people to pay for treatments. When the cancer came back and he couldn't work anymore, he couldn't repay what he owed. Brenda was crying now, the first real tears I'd seen from her in 20 years. "They killed him, Emily. Made it look like a complication from the cancer, but they killed him." "That's impossible. The doctors said his organs shut down from the chemotherapy." The doctors didn't know what to look for. It was subtle, something that would mimic organ failure. Brenda reached for Emily's hand with shaking fingers. "The night before he died, David told me everything. He said they'd threatened to hurt you next if the debt wasn't paid." Emily pulled her hand away. "So you left me? If Dad was killed because of money he owed, your solution was to abandon me?" "I left you because they told me if I disappeared and stayed gone, they'd consider the debt settled. If I stayed, if I tried to fight for custody or make a scene, they'd come after you." Brenda's voice broke completely. "I thought I was protecting you by leaving." The room was silent except for the beeping of monitors. Emily stood up and walked to the window, her back to her mother. "Even if that's true, you could have explained. You could have told Grandma Dorothy or the police or someone. Who would have believed me? A grieving widow claiming her husband was murdered by loan sharks. They covered their tracks perfectly, and I had no proof. So you chose to let me think you abandoned me because you didn't love me. I chose to let you hate me if it meant you'd stay safe." Emily turned around, tears streaming down her face. "For 15 years, I thought I wasn't worthy of love. I thought there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made my own mother leave. There was never anything wrong with you, Emily. You were the best thing David and I ever did together, and losing you was the worst punishment I could have faced. Where have you been all this time? Moving around, staying invisible, drinking too much because it was the only way to live with what I'd done." Brenda coughed, and I could see blood on her lips. "I kept track of you, though. Newspaper articles, graduation announcements, anything I could find. I was so proud when you became a doctor, but I never thought I'd see you again." Emily sat back down, her professional training warring with her personal emotions. "Mom, why are you telling me this now?" "Because yesterday, one of them was here, in the hospital, asking questions about you." My blood went cold. Emily grabbed her mother's arm. "What do you mean someone was here asking about me?" "Middle-aged man. Expensive suit, said he was from an insurance company checking on my family for benefits purposes. But I recognized the voice, Emily. It was Tony Marchetti, the man who collected for the people David borrowed from." You think they've found you? I think they never lost track of me, and if they're asking about you now, it means they're considering whether the debt is really settled. Brenda's breathing was becoming labored. Emily, you need to be careful. These aren't people who forget or forgive. Emily looked at me, panic in her eyes. The mother who'd abandoned her was dying, but she might also be the key to understanding a threat we didn't even know existed. What exactly did Dad owe them? How much money are we talking about? $200,000 plus interest that's been compounding for 15 years. By now, probably close to $500,000. Emily stood up again, pacing. This is insane. You're telling me that my father's murder was covered up, that you've been hiding for 12 years, and that now these people might be coming after me? I'm telling you that I made choices that seemed right at the time, but destroyed both our lives. Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway. Emily, I need to speak with you. Her condition is deteriorating again. As Emily stepped into the hallway for a medical consultation, Brenda looked at me with desperate eyes. Dorothy, you have to protect her. They won't just kill her, they'll make her disappear completely. Emily has no idea how dangerous these people are. Brenda, if this is true, why didn't you go to the FBI years ago? Because they own people in law enforcement too. The only reason I'm telling you now is because I'm dying and they can't hurt me anymore. When Emily returned, her face was grim. Mom, your liver is shutting down again. The dialysis isn't working and your kidneys are failing. We have maybe hours, not days. Then I need to give you something. Brenda struggled to reach the small bag of belongings beside her bed. There's a safety deposit box, number 247 at First National downtown. The key is taped under the soap dispenser in the bathroom here. What's in the box? Everything David documented about the money laundering. Names, dates, amounts, even some recorded conversations. He was planning to go to the authorities when he got strong enough. Brenda's voice was getting weaker. If something happens to me, if they come for you, that evidence is your only bargaining chip. Emily sat down heavily. In the space of an hour, her entire understanding of her family history had been shattered. Mom, I don't know if I can forgive you for the years we lost. I don't expect you to. But Emily, promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't let them destroy your life the way they destroyed ours. 20 minutes later, Brenda slipped into unconsciousness for the final time. Emily held her hand as her vital signs faded, and I watched my granddaughter say goodbye to the woman who'd given her life, abandoned her, and finally, possibly, saved her again. 3 days after Brenda's death, Emily found the safety deposit box key exactly where her mother had said it would be. We drove to First National Bank together, both of us nervous about what we might discover. The box contained documents that confirmed every word of Brenda's story. David's medical bills, loan agreements with obviously false names, bank records showing payments to construction companies that didn't exist, and most damning of all, recordings of conversations between David and men discussing money that needed to be cleaned through construction projects. My father really was involved in money laundering, Emily said, staring at a ledger in David's handwriting. Look at these amounts. Hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing through his business accounts. The recordings were the most chilling evidence. David's voice, weak from cancer treatments, discussing payment schedules with men who spoke in coded language about solving problems and handling situations. Emily, we need to take this to the authorities immediately. And tell them what? That my dead father was laundering money for criminals 12 years ago? That my recently deceased alcoholic mother claimed he was murdered? Emily was trying to think like a doctor, analyzing the evidence objectively. Who's going to believe this? That question was answered the next morning when Emily arrived at work to find 2 FBI agents waiting in her office. Dr. Porter, I'm Agent Sarah Collins. This is Agent Mark Rodriguez. We'd like to speak with you about your mother's death and some inquiries that have been made about your family. Emily's face went pale, but her voice remained steady. What kind of inquiries? A man named Anthony Marchetti has been asking questions about Brenda Sullivan's family connections. Mr. Marchetti is a person of interest in several ongoing investigations related to money laundering and racketeering. So Brenda had been right. The man who'd visited the hospital was exactly who she thought he was. Agent Collins, I think there are some things you need to see. Emily made copies of everything from the safety deposit box and turned them over to the FBI. The agents spent 3 hours reviewing the documents and recordings, their expressions growing more serious with each piece of evidence. Dr. Porter, this information could be extremely valuable to our investigation, but it also puts you in considerable danger. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. These people don't consider debts settled just because time has passed. What exactly are you saying? We're saying that if Anthony Marchetti and his associates believe you have information that could implicate them, or if they think you might have access to money they believe belongs to them, they won't hesitate to eliminate that threat. Emily sat back in her chair. So my mother was right. She did leave to protect me. It appears so. But Dr. Porter, 15 years have passed. The statute of limitations has expired on most financial crimes, and many of the people involved in these activities are dead or in prison. The current threat level is difficult to assess. Agent Collins opened a folder. We can offer you protective custody while we investigate the current status of these criminal organizations. Protective custody means leaving my job, my life, my husband. For how long? Potentially months, possibly longer. Emily looked at me, then back at the agents. There has to be another option. We could arrange surveillance, monitor your activities, and hope nothing happens. But Dr. Porter, these people have already demonstrated they're willing to kill to protect their interests. That night, Emily and James sat at their kitchen table, discussing options that all seemed impossible. Leave everything they'd built together and disappear into witness protection, or stay and hope that 12-year-old crimes wouldn't catch up with them. Whatever you decide, I'm with you, James said, holding Emily's hand. But sweetheart, you've worked too hard to build this life to let criminals destroy it. What if staying gets us both killed? What if running means they win? Emily was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, I want to stay and fight. I want to use Dad's evidence to help the FBI put these people away permanently. The next morning, Emily called Agent Collins. I want to cooperate fully with your investigation. No protective custody, but I'll wear a wire, set up meetings, whatever you need. Dr. Porter, that's extremely dangerous. We're talking about organized crime figures who've killed before. Agent Collins, I spent 2 months living on the streets when I was 16. I survived that. I survived medical school. I survived losing both my parents. I'm not going to let fear control my life now. The plan they developed was both simple and terrifying. Emily would continue her normal routine while wearing recording equipment. If Marchetti or his associates approached her, she'd try to get them to admit to David's murder or reveal information about current criminal activities. The key is making them believe you're not a threat, Agent Rodriguez explained. Let them think you're just a doctor who inherited some old papers and doesn't understand their significance. 2 weeks later, the trap was set. Emily was leaving the hospital after a long surgery when a black sedan pulled up beside her in the parking garage. Dr. Porter? Tony Marchetti. I knew your father. Maybe we could talk. Emily's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. I'm sorry. I don't know who you are. Your mother never mentioned me? We had some business dealings with your dad before he passed. This was it. The moment that would determine whether the evidence David had gathered 12 years ago would finally bring justice, or whether Emily would become another casualty in a war she'd inherited from her parents. What kind of business dealings, Mr. Marchetti? The kind that don't just disappear when someone dies, Dr. Porter. The kind that get passed down to family members. Emily got into the car, knowing it might be the last decision she ever made. Your father was a smart man, Dr. Porter, but he made some very stupid choices. Tony Marchetti drove through downtown Denver like he owned the city, which, given what Emily was learning, he probably did in many ways. The recording device Agent Collins had hidden in Emily's medical coat was capturing every word. But that wouldn't help if Marchetti decided she was too dangerous to leave alive. Mr. Marchetti, I'm not sure what you're talking about. My father died of cancer 12 years ago. Right, cancer. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what it said on the death certificate anyway. Amazing what cooperative doctors will write when they're properly motivated. Emily's blood went cold. He was confirming everything Brenda had told her. Are you saying my father didn't die from his illness? I'm saying your father borrowed a lot of money to pay for treatments that weren't covered by insurance. When he couldn't pay it back, we had to protect our investment. They were driving toward the warehouse district now, away from populated areas. Emily tried to keep her voice calm. How much money are we talking about? $200,000 principal, plus 15 years of compound interest at 30% annually. By my calculations, your family owes us approximately $800,000. The amount was staggering, but Emily forced herself to focus on getting more information. Mr. Marchetti, I'm just a doctor. I don't have that kind of money. But you have something more valuable, Dr. Porter. You have access to information that could be very damaging to some very important people. I don't understand. Marchetti pulled into an abandoned warehouse and parked. Your father was documenting our business relationship, recording conversations, keeping records of transactions. We know he hid that evidence somewhere before he died. Emily's heart was racing, but she realized this might be her only chance to get the full truth. Even if that's true, what makes you think I know where it is? Because your mother showed up after 12 years of hiding, and 3 days later you cleaned out her safety deposit box. They'd been watching her. The FBI surveillance hadn't been enough to protect her from people who'd been planning this confrontation for weeks. The box was empty except for some old photos and my father's wedding ring. Marchetti turned to face her, and Emily saw the cold calculation in his eyes. Dr. Porter, I'm going to be very clear about your situation. You have information we need, and we have the ability to make your life very unpleasant if you don't cooperate. What exactly do you want from me? Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence your father collected. In exchange, we'll consider his debt settled and leave you alone. Emily pretended to consider the offer. And if I refuse, then you'll have a tragic accident, maybe a car crash on your way home from work, maybe a drug overdose after someone breaks into your house. These things happen to doctors more often than people realize. The threat was clear and specific, but Emily had spent 12 years learning how to be stronger than her circumstances. Mr. Marchetti, there's something you should know about me. I've been through things that would destroy most people, and I'm still here. Threatening me isn't going to get you what you want. Is that right? That's right. Because I don't have your evidence, I didn't take anything from my mother's safety deposit box, and even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you. Marchetti's face darkened. Dr. Porter, you're making a very serious mistake. No, Mr. Marchetti, you made the mistake. You killed my father. You destroyed my mother's life. And you orphaned a 16-year-old girl. Now you want me to help you cover up your crimes. Emily reached into her coat and pulled out her phone, showing him that she'd been recording their entire conversation. But the really big mistake you made was confessing to murder while I was wearing an FBI wire. The warehouse doors burst open, and 6 federal agents surrounded the car with weapons drawn. Agent Collins yanked Marchetti out of the driver's seat while Agent Rodriguez secured Emily. Anthony Marchetti, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, money laundering, and threatening a federal witness. As they handcuffed Marchetti, he looked at Emily with pure hatred. This isn't over, Dr. Porter. Yes, it is, Emily said calmly. It's been over for 15 years. You just didn't know it yet. 6 months later, Emily sat in federal court watching Tony Marchetti receive a life sentence for David's murder and dozens of other crimes. The evidence David had gathered, combined with Emily's recorded confession, had dismantled an entire criminal organization. Your father would be proud, Agent Collins told Emily after the sentencing. His documentation was key to solving cases we'd been working on for years. That evening, Emily and I sat on my back porch, watching the sunset like we had so many times before. Grandma Dorothy, do you think Mom really left to protect me? Or was that just something she told herself to feel better about abandoning me? I'd thought about this question for months. Emily, I think people can do the right thing for complicated reasons. Your mother made terrible choices, but in the end, her information helped you finish what your father started. I used to think becoming a doctor was about saving lives. Now I understand it's about more than that. It's about justice, about protecting people who can't protect themselves. Emily had already started working with a foundation that provided medical care to homeless teenagers. Her experience had given her unique insight into the struggles of abandoned children, and she was using her success to help others who'd faced similar trauma. What about Brenda? Can you forgive her now that you know the truth? Emily was quiet for a long time. I can understand her choices without forgiving the damage they caused. She let me believe I was unlovable for 15 years. That's not something you just forget. But I'm grateful she came back when she did. If she hadn't told me the truth, Marchetti might have succeeded in making me disappear. A year later, Emily was named Chief of Trauma Surgery at Denver General, the youngest department head in the hospital's history. Her acceptance speech mentioned the importance of second chances, the power of chosen family, and the responsibility that comes with surviving what others don't. As I watched her address the medical staff, I thought about the scared 16-year-old I'd found behind a Walmart 15 years earlier. That girl had become a woman who saved lives, fought criminals, and turned her deepest pain into purpose. Emily never did reconcile with Brenda's memory completely, but she did have David's name engraved on a plaque in the hospital's memorial garden, honoring him as a father who made difficult choices to save his daughter's life. The inscription read simply, "David Mitchell, father, protector, hero. His love saved more lives than he ever knew." Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything your enemies never thought you could be, and using that success to make sure no one else suffers what you endured. Emily kept that promise every day, one patient at a time. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.